I heard he quoted my mom and quoted other people today.
What his mom talked to him about. So probably that doesn't have any direct impact on what we were supposed to talk about, but still it shows the quality of his moral values. It's very attractive, so I think we found a common language.
I explained things based on personal basis, letting him know where I stood, what I thought we could accomplish together, and what, in fact, if there were violations of American sovereignty, what we would do.
I think he's a constructive person, he's a reasonable person, he's a very experienced person. We protect the interest of our nations, of our peoples, and so these relations are always more pragmatic.
President Joe Biden has arrived back in the United States after 3 days of diplomacy in Europe that were capped by a fiery speech from Poland in which he said Russian President Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. Washington quickly sought to clarify Biden's remarks, with Secretary of State Antony Blinken reiterating Sunday that the U.S. was not pursuing a strategy of regime change in Moscow. The fallout from the comments, which prompted a swift response from the Kremlin, overshadowed Biden's efforts to frame Russia's war in Ukraine as the battle of a generation and to rally the world's support behind the embattled democracy. While NATO countries have backed Kyiv and sought to punish Moscow with sanctions, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky again urged them to send more planes, tanks and weapons to support his country's dogged resistance. Having struggled to make progress in the first month of the war, Moscow's forces appeared to be focusing on an effort to secure control of eastern Ukraine while battling Ukrainian counterattacks. The number of Russian expatriates living in the West is growing, but they said conversations with peers and family back home about the war have grown more difficult in the wake of the Ukraine invasion. Since President Vladimir Putin suggested Russians who live abroad were scum and traitors in a speech last week, conversations they managed to have with relatives and friends back home have grown tense or they avoid the topic of the war altogether. Numerous Russians have fled the country as a result of the invasion and the crackdown, likely for good, but the views of those still in Russia have hardened in support of the Kremlin, as years of anti-West propaganda get cemented in the country's new reality. As Kyiv continues to stand firm against Russia's advance, high school and college students in Ukraine's capital will be able to resume learning as of Monday, albeit only remotely. We made this decision based on the opinion of experts, primarily psychologists who support the resumption of the educational process, said Deputy Chairman of the Kyiv City Council Valentin Mondrievsky. The purpose of distance learning during the war is not only the acquisition of new knowledge, but also psychological support, communication, switching children's attention, Mondrievsky said. Teachers have been told to avoid extensive homework and assessments, he added, with a focus on helping students rather than creating additional stress. Several U.S. allies have distanced themselves from President Joe Biden's forceful comments about Russian President Vladimir Putin. French President Emmanuel Macron said Sunday he would choose words that do not escalate tensions around the war in Ukraine. We want to stop the war that Russia has launched, without waging war and without escalation, Macron told the Dimanche en Politique show on the country's France 3 TV channel. We made the choice not to intervene in the conflict militarily. We must not be in the escalation, neither of the words, nor of the actions, he said. Macron said that he would not have called Putin a butcher, which Biden did on Saturday. In a speech in Poland, Biden also said of Putin, "For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power." The White House and Secretary of State Antony Blinken have since clarified that the U.S. is not pursuing a strategy of regime change in Moscow. Britain's Education Secretary, Nadhim Zahawi, told Sky News that it was up to the Russian people to decide the fate of Putin.